Hello. Are we on?
We are live, Mina. Yeah.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. I wasn't entirely sure. I'd start talking to myself here. Well, thank you. Thank you, Audrey, for setting this up. Welcome, everyone. Good morning. It's wonderful to be here today. I'm very excited to host this webinar from the traditional territory of the Lheidli people, which is where the Carrie Sukan Tribal Office is in Prince George, BC. I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Mina Holmes. I'm the Tribal Chief for Carrie Sukan Tribal Council. I'm of the Letsamushu Beaver clan out of Tlazdan Nation, and very excited for this conversation again. Just very quickly, before we delve into why we're here today, is to the Carrie Sukan Tribal Council is the provides political and technical support to 7 member First Nations. CSTC also coordinates government-to-government negotiations between our member nations and the province of BC and the federal government. The combined population of Carrie Sukan Tribal Council's member nations is just over 5,000 people, and the combined territories of the Tribal Council member First Nations approximately 6.96 million hectares, which is about 7% of British Columbia. And why we're here today is to introduce you all, which again, thank you for joining us today. We're here today to have a conversation and hear from a group of champions and change makers regarding the Assembly of First Nations, the AFN Resolution 13 that passed in the December 2020 AGA AFN. I'd love to introduce to you Chief Doris Bill of Kwanlin First Nation and Yukon Regional Chief Kluane Adamek, and Annita McPhee, Facilitator of the Lateral Violence Workshop, as well as an entrepreneur. So welcome everyone here today. Thank you for joining us. And just to get us started, before we turn it over, love to have each of you introduce yourselves, a bit about yourselves, and some of the kind of questions I think we'd like to kind of hear from after your introductions is, tell us about what Resolution 13 is and what it represents. What is the problem that the resolution tries to address, and what kind of discussion came out of the resolution as it was before the AFN or during the AFN AGA, and how does this relate to the UN Declaration, United Nations Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous Peoples? And what do you mean by becoming a role model? I know there are tons of other questions that will come up. I just wanted to give those as kind of a starter point as we walk through each of you kind of responding to these. So if we could have a round of introductions, please. Regional Chief of the Yukon, Kluane Adamek, if you could please introduce yourself first, and then Chief Doris Bill, and then Annita McPhee. Thank you. You're muted.
Yes, the classic. Danje, Kluane Adamek Uye, Dachlawedi Ayahat, Ageo Hatu Asauk, Kluan Man Kai Iche, Ganach Chish Ta'an, Ganach Chish Kwanlin Dan. I am Kluane Adamek and from the Dachlawedi Killerwell clan. I'm a citizen of Kluane First Nation. This is Kluane Lake in the background, and Touch Al Dal, which is Sheep Mountain, otherwise known. I'm joining you live from Whitehorse, the traditional territory, of course, of Kwanlin Dun. Chief Bill is with us. Really excited to hear from her this morning, and Ta'an Kwich An. Really, I think I want to acknowledge you, of course, Chief, for bringing us together to have this important conversation. It's wonderful to be, joined together with incredible women. As we know, women empowering women is so important in this work that we do. I want to acknowledge you, Annita, former president of the Tahltan Nation. It's so great to see women, of course, advancing leadership in a number of different ways. So today is going to be a great conversation. Looking forward to it. And thank you again for the opportunity to join you.
Thank you. Chief Doris Bill.
Well, good morning, everyone. Dunjay. I am chief of the Kwanlin Dun First Nation, which is situated in the heart of the city of Whitehorse, which is the capital of the Yukon. I'm a member of the Wolf Clan, and our community is, like I said, in the city of Whitehorse, it's about 1 kilometer by kilometer, plus we have another small area in another part of the city. We have over 1,000 citizens that belong to our First Nation. They don't all live in the Yukon. They're kind of spread out across Canada. And I just want to thank you for your interest in Resolution 13. I know that, you know, this has started an important conversation and a long overdue conversation. And I just want to thank Chief Holmes for reaching out. And you know, I think that we need to do more of this kind of thing. We really do. Thank you.
Must see. Annita? You're muted.
Thank you for letting me know. It's good to know that. So I just want to start off by saying thank you to Chief Mina Holmes and all the wonderful women leaders here for having this, you know, important conversation this morning. And I just want to say that I'm grateful for being here. And I want to say Kaskuya, Ushya, Danathwatia, Chiona Justini, Gutsama Justini, Tagishkwan Justini, and Madu. So I was just telling you, my name is Kaskuya, I'm a wolf, and I'm from Gutsama, and I'm from Tagishkwan. And I'm also from the Tahltan and Tlingit Nation, so Madu and Gunischish. And I wanted to let you know that I'm the executive director. I recently got hired on as the executive director for Canadian Parks and Wilderness Society, BC. And it's really an honor as an Indigenous woman, as an Indigenous leader, to be blazing trails in the environment, where to be a leader of a major environmental organization, because there hasn't been one. So I'm really grateful for this opportunity. And so I want to say thank you again, and looking forward to the conversation today.
Thank you, Masi. Oh my God, goodness, such an honor to be here with all of you. I'm huge fans of all of the wonderful work that each of you do. And so again, thank you for joining us here today. And just a bit before, I think maybe could start with Regional Chief Kluane. You know, starting the conversation off with telling us a bit about, you know, this resolution. For those, I think a lot of the viewers that we have watching this on Facebook Live today may not have heard about the resolution. And I came upon it in a news article because I didn't attend that AFN meeting. So I felt badly afterwards for not attending that one. However, something just sparked. And so I reached out to Chief Doris Bill and said, hey, can you kind of tell me about this? And as we were talking on the phone, we realized that, you know, this should be a larger public conversation, and to start bringing awareness to this very important and long overdue addressing this long overdue issue, or long overdue in addressing these issues. So that's how we've come to be here today. And I know there's a lot of interest from the communities that I work with, and all over BC, and I think all over this country, actually. So, you know, again, thank you. So if we could let's just delve into the conversation here. We're super interested in hearing some background about this. And, Kluane, if you just kind of lead us into this, and there's no formal structure to this conversation. We just wanted to have a very relaxed conversation, some interaction. So, you know, if you want to jump in at some point, you know, of course, not talking over each other, but just jump in at some point and let's just talk about this. So Kluane, start us off.
Sure. Thank you. And I want to acknowledge again, Chief Bill, as a seconder of this resolution, Cal Salem from the Squamish Nation as a mover of this resolution. And, you know, if we were to walk back a little bit and really think about, the ways in which as Indigenous people, but particularly as Indigenous women, the roles and responsibilities that Indigenous women have always had. And how does that translate into, you know, the governance, decision-making, advocacy, policy structures that exist? We've got some huge gaps, right? Like huge gaps. And so I want to say that this resolution, you know, led by the two leaders aforementioned, was really, you know, certainly wasn't about any one individual. This was about saying, as a national organization, what needs to change so that people feel that their voices are heard, they feel safe to participate, and that we're doing everything we can to ensure that at every space and place, voices are heard and respected. And I want to go back to just for a moment, when we think about, you know, the MMIWG 2QIA 2S plus inquiry that was done, 1.4 of the directives talks about calling upon governments, in particular Indigenous governments and Indigenous representative organizations, to take urgent and special measures to ensure that all Indigenous women and girls, 2SL, GBTQIA people are represented in governance and that their political rights are represented and upheld. So it talks about equity, support, and promoting the roles of Indigenous women in decision-making processes. And so, you know, definitely, and I can certainly, and I know I'm not the only woman that has been uncomfortable before, that has had things said to her before that are not okay, that has been questioned about their abilities because they're a woman, or has been targeted because they're a woman. Like this is, we all experience it. So again, this I would say the spirit and intent and the work that Chief Bill and Cal Salem did to put something together that wasn't about condemning or shaming or punishing anybody. That's not what this is about. This is actually really about creating the changes that we need to see and holding up a mirror to say, are we part of the problem or are we part of the solution? And so, you know, I have hope. I have hope that as a national organization, you know, the resolution was passed. We understand now that the panel, the councils that were to appoint the panel, that is progressing. So this is a moment in our shared history where we've said we can do better and we have to do better. And I really want to acknowledge, and I'm going to just pause my comments to turn it over to Chief Bill, because I really, I think it's really important for people to hear from the seconder directly on this. But what I will say is that now more than ever, we need to create the space. And, you know, as a society, you know, for non-Indigenous women, right, we're seeing all these changes happening, and we're seeing, you know, there's new federal legislation, et cetera, the UN declaration, right? There's all of these different mechanisms, but it's really hard to hold up a mirror and say, am I part of this problem or part of the solution? So I'm going to leave my comments there. I'm really, I think it's really important you hear directly from Chief Bill on some of the specifics. But again, this resolution was to be open and positive, and for AFN to be that leader that it can be in terms of creating the spaces to ensure that women and those who identify, and men and those who identify, feel that they're able to talk and share and be heard.
Okay, great start. Thank you. Chief Doris.
Well, you know, everything Kluane said is exactly the reasons I signed on to this resolution. You know, for me, this resolution is very special. I often say that change is hard. It's very hard. And it's even harder when you look within yourself, when you look internally. And that is what this is designed to do. It's designed to address those systemic issues that have been plaguing our organization for a long time. We know, I've heard from women who have reached out to me after this resolution was passed, we knew that in order to get this resolution passed, we had to approach it in a certain way. We had to approach this in a positive way, and to really, you know, it's part of examining ourselves. And I think that, you know, the purpose of the resolution in this, the stated purpose of the resolution is to end sexual orientation and gender-based discrimination and all forms of violence, including sexualized violence, lateral violence, and bullying within the organization. And like Kluane said, it's not aimed at any one individual. That was not our intended purpose. We do know that there are allegations out there now, again, you know, that there are some incidents that are in the public eye that are currently being looked at that involve regional chiefs. And, you know, our intent really is to make sure that those incidents are looked at in a good way, in that they're properly looked at, that they're properly investigated, that the rights of the individuals are protected. Our intent was to create a safe space for women and two-spirited and youth to be able to come forward and tell their truth. It's incredibly important that this be done in a fair, impartial, and independent manner. And that's why the resolution is structured the way it is. We chose the youth and elders and the Women's Council to choose those investigators because we felt that we had, you know, they would be able to make a really good, sound decision. And this is about providing a safe space for them. And, you know, we excuse me, my throat is a bit funny today. The panel eventually will come together and look at the systemic issues and look at existing cases that are out there. They will report to the chiefs in assembly within 6 months. However, because of COVID, we're a bit off schedule, and we're hoping for a final report within 9 months of the resolution's passing. The resolution itself, we were overwhelmed when it passed, you know, to say the least, because you know, people were starting to tell us the chances of getting that through are zero. And, but we had faith. We had faith, and we kept the faith, and we kept this in a positive light. We addressed any issues and concerns that people have, and we were absolutely over the moon when it passed with the over 70% of the support that it did. And, you know, I think that says something in itself, in that maybe we have grown a little. Maybe our people have grown a little. Our people carry a lot of baggage, you know, and this goes farther back than residential school. We carry a lot of baggage, and we've never been able to let that baggage go. And it really affects how we treat each other. It affects how we treat each other at the council table, at the executive tables. You know, it affects how we treat each other within the community. And we were hoping that by introducing this resolution, it would start a conversation. It would start a conversation around gender-based discrimination and violence, lateral violence, bullying, and to say that it's not acceptable. We have been carrying this so long that for some of our people, this is normalized. We've normalized it. And we have to figure out a way to let that go. And I think, you know, I'm hoping that this conversation, you know, by having the AFN take the lead, that other communities will follow. And I think it's important that the AFN itself take the lead, because, you know, there's several reasons. One, it's a national organization that people look to. People need to see themselves reflected in the organizations that serve them. The AFN has long been dominated by men, you know, and sometimes people may not know what they're doing is lateral violence. So we need to call it out when we see it. We need to call it for what it is. And we need to talk about it. We need to start talking about it. And, you know, I was extremely proud to sign on to this resolution. And I will say the beauty about this resolution is that Kilsalem is the mover. I have not met him in person to this day, but I really look forward to meeting him someday. And I was extremely proud, you know, because I think we often say that if you are not standing up against these kinds of issues, then you're just standing by and watching. You're witnessing. That's all you are. You're not part of the solution. And I'm standing up for the women, the two-spirited, the youth, all of those who don't have a safe space to tell their truth. And that's what this is about. It's about bringing forward our issues and our concerns. And this is 2020. It's time we stop this. You know, it's time we deal with these issues head on. You know, I truly believe that some of these issues are directly tied to the missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls issue. There's sort of a silence there where we don't talk about some of these things. You know, we don't talk about our role in the missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls issue. You know, I'm a leader here, not just in our community, but across the country around community safety. The community safety issues is extremely important. If you're going to tackle the missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls issue, you need to start looking, we need to start looking at ourselves. We need to start looking within our communities and start that conversation, because nobody is going to solve your problems within your community but you, but the community itself. And I speak about this issue a lot because when we started our community safety program here in the Yukon, we started with, we had over 600 and over 1,000 something calls to the RCMP within a year. And within the first year of the community safety program that we implemented with the community, that dropped around 40%. And that it's amazing what it has done. You know, we have had young women that were murdered in our community. And it really, the community safety program has really opened our eyes. It has started us talking. It has started us talking about the safety issues within our community. Because I truly believe, you know, on when it comes to this issue, we are the ones that have to drive that conversation. We are the ones that have to drive the safety issues in our community. We are the ones that have to deal with all of this. So, but it starts by having these kinds of conversations. And I think we need to walk down this road together. It's going to be a difficult journey, but we've been here before, you know, we've been here before. And I'll just leave it at that for now. And maybe I'll say more as the day goes on. And I'm just so incredibly pleased to be proud of this conversation.
Thank you. Sorry, unmute myself as I'm telling others to unmute. Thank you, Chief Doris Bill. Annita.
Good morning in Taltan. I'm really happy to be here, like I said, and one of the things that's really important for me as an Indigenous woman, and when I was really proud of the AFN to come forward with this resolution, because as a woman and being a former leader, and you are in rooms that are filled with men, and then when you go into negotiations with the government, whether it's provincial, federal, most of those rooms are filled with men. And anytime you're stepping into these leadership roles, so you think about yourself, and if there's 75% men and there's 25% women, the first thing I think to myself is like, oh geez, well, I'm kind of alone here. Not alone, but I feel like that because I'm a woman in this room, and it feels a little bit intimidating, especially when you first come in as a woman. And then so, with this resolution, it says to me that the leadership is starting to say, okay, we're going to do something about helping those 25% of women feel safe in that room. We're going to actually take a stand, and we're going to make it so that they do feel safe, that they know that there's support here for them, and that they don't have to feel intimidated, that they don't have to feel like they're being sexualized at any point, that this is a standard and a boundary that's going to be created, and we're going to support that safety. Because, like Kluane said earlier, I've heard the comments myself, like, where I felt uncomfortable and I didn't feel like I could say anything back because I was in a top leadership position, and I didn't want to lose my place in the club. And it's unfortunate that as an educated, smart, and intelligent Taltan woman that I had to kind of put myself down to make somebody else feel comfortable, when it should be the other way around. Like, how am I going to make it so that these women feel safe if I'm a man? Like, how do I do that? So, for me, community safety, like we were talking about, valuing women and really creating resources in our communities to support women, by starting in our communities. I think this is a really great start. But I also know that, we can come into these rooms and we can feel safe, and there could be mechanisms to create safety. But I also know that when we go back to our communities and we're in our communities, we need mechanisms there to feel safe. Like we need the support as women to heal from a lot of the hurts that hurt us in the past. We need supports for our children so that they know that they're safe. Like, for me, safety is a really big issue in our community. And I don't mean just safety from sexual violence. I mean lateral violence, bullying, the emotional violence that pretty much plagues our communities at this point, and all the speakers before me said it before, that, this painful history really affects the way we treat each other. And we need a space to be able to talk about it, to really talk about the things that have hurt us, and to not carry any shame when we're going to be able to talk about these things. And I'll just say it, talking about sexual abuse, especially as Indigenous women, having the resources to address these kinds of hurts, where we don't have to feel like we're being singled out because we're addressing something that happened to us in the past, that somebody hurt us, an adult hurt us as a child, that we as women don't have to feel belittled when we bring up issues from the past, that we are held up and spaces are created safely for us to have those conversations. And I think that's the biggest step coming forward with this resolution, is recognizing that, yes, women need safe spaces, whether we're in the leadership rooms, whether we're in our community, whether our kids our girls are in school, because that's what teaches us that we're valuable women and we deserve to be valued. We are not worthless, and we do not deserve to be treated and talked about the way the media talks about us. And we certainly don't need it in our communities. You know, we really need to be held up high in our own communities. But in fact, it's the opposite. We're being pushed down lower in our communities. And in fact, if you're a woman with a powerful voice, which all of us are on this, we know what it's like to have a powerful voice and to try to be shut down. And you know what? When we talk about safety, it's really important that we're allowed to speak our voice and not feel belittled. And I think that's a really important step. Thank you.
Thank you. Wow, I'm blown away. I have so many questions. So as I said, this is really like a coffee talk with a bunch of people on Facebook Live, kind of watching this conversation. And I just want to highlight before I start bringing forward some comments and questions that Audrey, our communications officer extraordinaire, is seeing in the Facebook comments. This is on Facebook Live. I just wanted to note that some common themes that I'm hearing here so far is around the impacts of colonial structures such as the residential school systems, and that how those experiences really were significant in impacting how we saw each other and ourselves, and carrying shame and trauma can play out. It's another thing I've heard here is how trauma can play out, and I heard it here as termed as that baggage that many people carry. So unresolved traumas kind of seem to play out on a daily basis, and people acting through those traumas, whether it be bullying, harassment, sexual harassment, intimidation. It's almost like there's I forget where I was going with that, but you see that quite a bit. So later on, I'm curious as to really solutions focused, like where do we go with this now? What are some of the things that we should individually and collectively be doing further down the road, moving forward from here, about addressing systemic trauma, if you will, and how do we hold those people up who are operating through those traumas, and continuation of those behaviors that we see that are very unhelpful for all of us. Another big theme I'm hearing so far is this space, safe space. And I'm right away like, well, what is safe space, and how do we create that? And another theme I'm hearing is like being able to speak up about these issues, and how do we create that safe space? So what does it look like for women and men as well, to be able to talk about what's kind of driving them, or in this conversation about creating safe space for women. So they are the 25% that are in that room. How do we ensure that they have a voice in there? And what's our role and responsibility in this? Chief Doris?
Can I say, often men don't have an opportunity to talk about these issues because there's very little services or programs or anything out there aimed at men. And men need to be part of the conversation. And they also need to have a conversation amongst themselves. A few years ago, we held a wonderful youth gathering. I think Kluane was part of it. It was here at Jackson Lake Healing Camp that Kwanlin owns. And we did something as simple as putting chairs around a fire, and men had a sharing circle, and we put 65 men took part in that sharing circle. And to this day, I cannot tell you what has been said in that circle. But a while later, I was at a missing and murdered family gathering in Whitehorse. And a young man stood up and he said, I just want to let you know that I want to thank Kwanlin Dunn. I want to thank the Jackson Lake Healing Program. He said a few years ago, I attended a circle there, and we talked around the fire. I talked with other men. He said, in my entire life, I have never had that opportunity to talk to other men about how I was feeling as a man and how I was feeling, you know, within my community, and I was struggling with things. For me, he said, it saved my life. And that's how incredibly important those kinds of things can be. You don't have to have a pile of money to come up with certain solutions. The solutions are within your community. Have a conversation. In Kwanlin Dunn here, we started a forum. It's called Let's Keep Talking. And we bring the community together to talk about safety issues within our community, or whatever issues are pertinent. Because of COVID, that's been kind of put on hold. But we used to have it once every month. And once COVID is over, we're going to reinstitute that. And it's a chance for our community to come together just to talk about the issues in the community. And I think it's important that we create those kinds of opportunities for our people. And, you know, it makes such a world of difference, for our men. You know, we've been really focused in pre-COVID on men's programming. You know, our men go out on a hunt together. They have drum making workshops together. You know, the single dads bring their kids. They do all kinds of things together. But just giving the men those kinds of opportunities makes a world of difference in how they feel. And I'll just stop there for.
Thank you. I guess something I'm thinking, kind of wondering about, well, I'm wondering about a lot of things. You know, what are, the thing that struck me was you said at the AFN, when this resolution was being prepared to be discussed or put on the floor there was, you know, some uncertainty that it would pass. And what can you share, like, what are those? Like, why is that? And what do you think some of the, anyone can speak to this, is, you know, what are the challenges you kind of see? What are the biggest challenges you see in moving this resolution to implementation and getting results?
Well, let's face it, some people, this is a controversial issue, you know, for some people. Some people don't want to talk about it. And some people refuse to believe there is a problem. Yeah. So there's a variety of resistance coming from, you know, certain areas. And it's understandable. You know, we expected, frankly, I expected a lot more opposition. I mean, Kluane may have felt it more than I did. I'm not sure. But you know, I think once we approached it in a positive way and said that this is not about targeting anyone, this really is about starting a conversation and providing a space for people to talk about these issues. You know, I think that once we started telling people about what our intent was, that those fears started to come down a little bit. And I just really, you know, I'm glad that in the end people supported it. And since the resolution has passed, I've heard from women, some within the organization, who thanked us for pushing this resolution through. They're really happy. And some telling me about their own incidents, you know, that the things that have happened to them. So we know there are issues, and I really hope that, you know, this can, the final report can come out with some really good recommendations in the end that takes a look at, you know, the systemic issues. And we're not just hoping for superficial change, we're hoping for transformative change. Yes. You know, I think it's really important that, you know, I kind of look at it's similar to child welfare in some cases where, you know, we deal, and I'm a former foster child, right? And you look at the health and social services department and the many issues that they have. And, you know, I was asked one time about the department and how they can change, and they were struggling with a lot of things to understand a lot of things. And I just said to them, well, your change can't just be on the surface. It has to be within. You need to transform the entire organization in order for that to happen. You know, our people need to be a huge part of that. And it really, I think that, yeah, I'm just hoping that will happen once the final report comes through. And I know we're asking a lot, you know, and but I think in the end, in the long run, this will be worth it for everyone.
For everyone. And thank you for sharing that, responding to that. And I that's kind of what I'm hearing too, is like, this is about everyone. And this healing camps or programs, right away I'm thinking that, what about family wellness camps throughout the year, or the summer seasons where you get back on the land and you making drums and storytelling, learning, reintegration to our language and our roles. And just before, I know Kluane and Annita, I know both of you, like, we'd love to hear more from both of you about some of the comments that I've had and questions I've asked. So just before, I just want to, like, feel negligent on not mentioning a couple of comments after we told everyone they could make comments and ask questions. So I just want to highlight one, and maybe that might be something where we can move forward on. Is Leo Isaac, he says, lateral violence is the ultimate form of colonization, because then the colonizers can step back as we harm one another. We have to heal from these intergenerational traumas by finally talking about it, not keeping them in the shadows. It's time for our matriarchal systems to rise again. We need to honor our life bringers. Who wants to go from there?
Go for it, Kluane.
I was going to speak about it, but go for it.
No, Annita, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I'll go next.
Who's going to go first on this?
You know, he's right about lateral violence being very prevalent in our Indigenous communities. And, you know, it does come from a long history of pain, and we're still feeling the impacts of colonization and that oppression, you know, and it started way before residential schools. This oppression and the pain and the impacts that come from, you know, the time when settlers came here and started to drive home that message to our people that, you know, the land didn't belong to us anymore, trying to put that image in our mind, you know, and not having that connection to the land says a lot to Indigenous people, because you're taking away their home. And, you know, so displacing us from our lands, that's huge. That causes so much pain and anger in itself, because it's a traumatic event. And then if that wasn't bad enough, taking our children away. So, I mean, those two acts alone are enough to cause any kind of trauma in anybody's life. But this has happened over and over and over, and the systems that have been designed to protect these acts of violence against Indigenous people, that's where the problem lies, is in the institutions, but it also, you know, in our own communities, because, you know, if we're defending these institutions, then we're also defending the violence that's happening in our communities. So, you know, I'm really big on creating safe spaces in our communities, like what we've heard before, places where we can heal, and we can heal from lateral violence. Because, you know, it's hard for us to feel safe if you're experiencing lateral violence as an individual, whether you're in leadership or a community member, or if you're a woman in leadership, or even if you're, you know, say you're answering the phones at the band office, like, no matter where you are in your community, if you start to feel those attacks, and it can feel really, really hurtful, and that's what lateral violence is it's an act of being mean, whether it's directly or indirectly. So if I'm talking to you and I'm yelling at you and I'm calling you down, or else I'm writing letters about you, trying to get rid of you, especially as a woman in leadership, because this happens a lot to women, especially in leadership, being directly attacked and feeling that lateral violence and being ostracized for being a woman in leadership. So, when we feel that, that kind of hurt and that kind of bullying and that kind of shaming, that lateral violence has stemmed from years and years of oppression. And now we're oppressing ourselves. And we need to, create places in our communities where we stop standing up for these organizations or, practices that actually continue to oppress us.
Some of it is cultural too. There are communities where women didn't participate in leadership, a long time ago. And women didn't pick up the drum. Women didn't do certain things within the community. And I find that sometimes that those type of sentiments are still felt today. And how do you how do you say to them, like, times have changed, traditions change, culture changes. Our cultures have certainly changed over the years. We've adapted Western ways in our regalia, in other things that we do. So we need to evolve. And I just find that, I think it's time that, high time that this conversation be had, and that, people need to understand that, we are strong, wonderful, amazing, incredible women who have loud voices, and we're not going to be oppressed anymore. We're not going to have our voices silenced. If we're going to come out of whatever it is we've been in the last 100 years, it's going to be the women that drive the way through. We're going to plow our way through it. And I don't want the next generation that comes after me to carry that same baggage that we've been carrying for all these years. I know youth that will not go to chief and council meetings because of the lateral violence that takes place around those tables. And they don't want to be, I have people that don't want to be part of leadership because of that. That's not right. What are we doing to our next generation? What are we saying to our people? We can get our points across in a really respectful, meaningful manner. You probably go a lot farther than treating people, disrespectfully. And, I've even seen it towards government a lot of times, and it's not just towards leadership, but towards other governments, to federal ministers. And, I walk out of the room and I feel awful about the way they were treated, So we really have to really take a look at ourselves, really take a look at what we're doing and how we're hurting people, and change the way in how we're trying to get our messages across. I just want to answer this one question to Candace George. She's talking about, I don't want that to go unanswered. How do we support our men when they lack male support and guidance? When I talked about this is an issue that's really close to my heart, because I really truly believe men have to start becoming part of the conversation. And if it takes women to create those opportunities for them, then we need to do that. And there are, you know, like I said, simple ways in which you can do that. Have a sharing circle, you know, put on workshops for them. And that's how it starts, you know, and you might have a leader that emerges among them, and nurture that person, help him, you know, give him guidance, and then let him take over. But that's how it starts. You know, everything doesn't have to cost a whole pile of money. You know, like a sharing circle is light a fire. Have a big sharing circle around the fire. We do a thing at our healing camp. We have family camps, by the way. But, you know, one of the things that we do is counsel by fire. We just go and we light a fire, and whoever needs counsel, they come, they sit by the fire with the counselor, have a cup of tea, and they just talk. We used to do that all the time. And people think it's a really novel, innovative idea. And I'm like, you know, we've gotten away from that. That was always part of who we were as people. And we've gotten away from that. So, you know, we're trying to bring some of those things back that were so meaningful for us.
Kluane?
Yeah, I really am so, I love these spaces, right? Because we can actually talk. We can talk openly. I know there's a lot of people who are listening. I think, you know, one of the things that is so important, and this whole concept of like, what is safe space? I think for so many of us, it's really a lot easier to think about, well, here's what safe space isn't, because of what it feels like, right? For people to be disrespectful, to have microaggressions, to also be, and this is a term that I'm hearing a lot more, like that whole concept of gaslighting. So like, if you feel a certain way, that's how you feel. No one gets to tell you that those feelings aren't true, aren't right, aren't accurate. And I think that is a problem. And I'm certainly, you know, so mindful. My grandmother went to residential school. My dad went to day school. And I know that there are impacts to, you know, to me as a human because of that. And someone said something recently to me. They're like, you know, we're emotional beings who think sometimes. And it really stuck with me because it feels like so often that the way that communities view emotion, the way that we view vulnerability as weakness, that it's not okay to show your feelings, that is not who we are.
Yeah.
That in fact, you know, it was my grandmother who said to me, you know, if you show your tears, it's a lot of the time because someone else needs to feel that. Someone else needs to know it's okay for them to also show their tears. And so I think that this whole concept of vulnerability and being brave and having courage, that is absolutely part of who we are, part of a lot of different teachings that we have. And again, not speaking on behalf of any nation, but when we think about the stories, when we think about the teachings and the way that vulnerability and courage and bravery are described, and then we go into a meeting room, it's like we forgot about all that. We're like, okay, let's focus on Robert's Rules of Order, and you know, this is how we're doing things. And that it feels like this constant clash for me, and been in so many a moment where I'm like, how did we get here? Like, how did we get here? This doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel like I can talk. Are you hearing what I'm saying? Those very real moments, or being challenged because you're a woman in a room with an idea. Like it's not okay, and it's also not who we are. And I think that's where, at the end of the day, you know, this whole concept of its time. And I saw, you know, there was a website that, you know, those who were part of the crafting of this resolution came up with. It's timefirstnations.ca, this whole concept of it's time. Like, it's time. It's time to talk about the roles and responsibilities that women have. It's time to acknowledge that the way that we're doing things and that we've done things for a long time in terms of like systems and mechanisms and governance might not be working for us. And so let's be okay with sitting with what is uncomfortable to have these harder conversations. And I fully align that we need to have, you know, and especially men, having 4 brothers myself, and knowing that for them growing up, showing emotion, it was okay to yell and get mad, but not so much okay by their peers to like show emotion in different ways. That we really do need to be mindful of how men are supported. At the same time, it doesn't give you a pass, a get out of jail free card to be terrible to women either. And I think that there's this whole balance, and I say that, you know, as openly and candidly as I can, that it's to say, oh, that's just the way they are. Like, I'm not okay with that anymore. And I think, you know, Annita, and I kind of heard you say this, right? It's like, sometimes it's so much easier when you see something happening, or, you know, you're conscious of whether you're going to be included in the conversation, whether you're going to be included in the room, right? It's like those moments where you're like, how do we address being a bystander when things like this are happening? And this whole concept of like silence is violence. And I do think, Annita, what you shared and Chief Bill about lateral violence, like the physical aggression and physical abuse, like so many of us have had to deal with that. I don't think it's okay to compare what it feels like to be verbally attacked to being physically assaulted, because you might feel it could feel really differently for you. So that's this whole concept of like comparative suffering that I don't think that we talk about a lot, but like, let's not compare what this feels like versus what this feels like. None of it's okay. So can we agree on, you know, and I think this is where maybe my last reflection of the safe space, that might need to be a conversation that we need to start having in whether it's organizations or communities. What do people need to feel safe in a space? And like, let's all work from there. And then you're able to kind of get to some of the issues, because I think it is very much, we're so, I think, tuned to speaking to like what doesn't work, that sometimes it is really hard to say, well, what then is the solution? And how do we create that safe space? And those are the conversations that are going to require, I think, a lot of energy and effort and time and courage to have them.
Great.
Yeah, I wanted to reflect a little bit on that, because it just really, you know, when I was talking about, you know, creating safe spaces, one thing, you know, and it's been a theme this whole week for me, because I've been doing this last 2 weeks about inclusion and, you know, around inclusion and diversity. Well, inclusion is much more than just hiring more women or having more women leaders. It's actually creating spaces where, you know, we do feel safe, you know, and we're included in the conversations, and we're participating in that decision making, where we're not just a token woman, where it's like, okay, well, we'll have a woman on the group. Well, no, you want to create a space for a woman to actually feel included in, and for our minds and our leadership ability, not just because you need to fill a space. So, you know, I want to see more women who look like me, who are in those rooms making big decisions. You know, we want to see more women involved in participating in all of these decision-making processes. And when we do participate, valuable inclusion, you know, not just because we're there. And I found that when I was in leadership, a lot of times, you know, my voice was kind of the lesser voice, even though, and why is it that we have to be loud and angry or portrayed as loud and angry when we make decisions? You know, we don't have to be those things, because just being in leadership alone is being a leader. And, we don't have to be put off as like these angry women because we're, standing up for ourselves, and that's what I mean by having true inclusion, and also having boundaries and having those boundaries respected. If I say, what, I'm uncomfortable with the way you're looking at me right now, or I'm uncomfortable with what you're saying to me right now, I don't want to hear, well, you're whatever kind of comeback that's going to come back, and just that whole process ignored, and too many times when we've brought forward issues around feeling uncomfortable as women, too many times they've been ignored, and it is the silence is violence, and it perpetuates this cycle of violence when we don't talk about it. And that's why I keep talking about having these safe spaces, because both Chief Bill and Kluane have both said that, about there isn't a safe space, but we need to create them. And it starts by our own behavior, all of us, even women to women, me respecting you as a leader, me respecting you as a woman, respecting you as a woman elder, not putting you down. And, it also starts with women too, with the way we treat other women, because a lot of times there's a lot of lateral violence there that comes from the systemic oppression.
Thank you. Another kind of what I'm hearing and here is too, I think it was one of the questions, I think it was Candace George who said, no, silence is violence, I think is what she said. It's pretty far up here now. So I'm wondering, what does, I think you touched a bit on this already, Annita, what does lateral violence look like and how can it feel? I know all of you have said some of this, but I just feel it's important to kind of highlight this, that, what does it look like and what can it feel like? And what is this concept of bystanders? And how do we stand up for ourselves? And what's our role in this? In these experiences or incidences, and what's the role of others? Like, what can we say? What is it we want to say to others who are witnessing this and saying or doing nothing? I'd love to hear some thoughts on that.
Sure. Did you want me to start about our lateral violence, just from what I know as a lateral violence facilitator?
Yes.
Well, I know that lateral violence can take on many different behaviors, and a lot of them are toxic. So it comes out in many different ways, and it can come out, with the way we speak to somebody, like our tone, and it also can come across with our body language. Mm-hmm. So some of the ways that we come across to people, but definitely the words that we say, because words are so powerful. Like, they can be good medicine where you can use words to lift people up and they can feel empowered, but it almost could feel like bad medicine, because when somebody says something so hurtful and so mean to you, where you just feel belittled, and and that lateral violence is it's a direct act of meanness, where you intentionally are mean to somebody, and you're being mean to them. You're being mean to them when you talk to somebody else behind their back, or you talk to other people to fire them, or these are examples, right? Like, or the sometimes, or your body language where it's like, yeah. And like, you could be standing in front of a room and somebody's sitting back going, nodding their head, rolling their eyes. We can feel all of that stuff. It feels uncomfortable, and it's meant to make us feel uncomfortable. The person doing it, but the person receiving it. And if you're constantly going through this, right, where somebody's calling you names, or they're saying mean things on the internet, or they're just, saying it right out. Well, that's a stupid thing to say, belittling your opinion, or why would I do that? Why would we do that? Like, that tone of voice. That can feel really hurtful. And some people, I've been often told, well, don't you just have to just toughen up? And I'm like, well, it's much more than toughening up. I know if I'm experiencing this on a regular basis, it really starts to get to me psychologically. And you know what, like whether it's in my work environment, whether it's in my home, whether it's in my community, and if different people are doing it, it can create this really big environment of toxicity, where it, like Doris said it earlier, this has become the norm where people are like, you know what, why should I even care about the way I act? Because everybody else is doing it. You know what? Nobody cares about my feelings, so I'm not going to try. It just creates this apathy where it doesn't matter, so why try? But you know what? It really does matter how we treat people, because the way we treat people is the way we want to be treated. And I know for a fact that I like to be treated with respect, and I like to be treated well, and I like to feel like that I'm worth it and the things that I say are important. So if I'm always experiencing the opposite of that, then that's lateral violence.
Thank you, Doris. Chief Doris.
There's that's great that on the federal level, there is legislation that is just coming out. It's called Respectful Workplaces legislation. It's made much stronger than the previous legislation, and many chief and councils don't know that they are going to be subject to this legislation. And so I think First Nation councils and that should be reviewing this legislation. And the other thing, like here in the Yukon, they just introduced legislation that now looks at harassment as a safety issue, because it can cause serious psychological damage. So they're looking at these issues in a different way now. And people need to be aware of that. And we need to inform our people of their rights when they have, when they experience these kind of things. 8 years ago, Kwanlin Dunn actually started the Lateral Violence Initiative here in Yukon. We built the program with the help of human rights advocates. And we also knew that the lateral violence issue needed a First Nation lens on it. So we crafted and created a lateral violence program just for that. And then we involved our youth. Our youth took over the program, and now they're teaching lateral violence workshops all over the place. But I think, as a leader, it's up to us to call it out at the table when we see it. I have a policy that's a zero tolerance for this stuff. We, several administrations ago, developed, I'm on my third term, so several years ago, we developed a lateral violence statement. Chief and council developed this statement. And we put that statement throughout the government and to let people know that we would not tolerate these things anymore. And we really, I think we need to start standing up and calling it out when we see it. We need to call it out and say it is for what call it what it is. And, there are ways as leaders that there are things we can do. You can review the legislation for one, make people more aware of these kinds of things. You can talk about Resolution 13, and what the intention is behind it. And there are things that you can do within your organization to make things safer. And I'm hoping that the resolution will be a guide for that and how we can do that. Because, let's face it, like, in our case here in the Yukon, some of us are really building governments We're building governments from the ground up. And we've never done this before. And creating a government can create all kinds of problems and issues, and it can create healthy debate and not so healthy debate, because you're dealing with policies and procedures and things that affect people's lives directly. It affects your mom, your dad, your auntie, your cousin. And so, when I develop these things, I always try to keep in mind certain people, because it helps me to guide my decision making. And sometimes I see a lot of self-interest, when some of these things are being developed, and you'd have to try to gently push away those self-interests, because you can't have policies that just serve certain people, So yeah, it's a challenge. It's a real challenge. But some of us are getting through it. Some of us are, I can't say we are a lateral violence free nation. I don't think anybody in the Yukon is a lateral violence free nation, but it sure is a lofty goal. I really look forward to a day when we can say that. We may never say it, but I think we're getting there. We're doing things that make lives easier, make things. We're doing things that make our people's lives easier, and we're calling it out when we see it. And we're doing all the right things, I think. We just need to do more of it.
Just another comment. Thank you again. I'm really enjoying this. This is a hard conversation, of course. It's a difficult topic, and I'm really just again very grateful. All the three of you have joined us today to have this conversation, and I just wanted to note something that I'm hearing is, because I think some of the questions people will ask is, well, is what I'm experiencing lateral violence, harassment, all of these things, gender bias, gender discrimination, and what do I do with this? What do I do with this, what I'm living in? And what I'm hearing is, well, you speak about it, you speak up about it, and others as well who are witnessing, other leaders as well they too need to speak up and call out behaviors. So that's, I think, going to be a starting place for folks. And oops, sorry, my phone. Somebody tried to phone me just now. And I'm kind of hearing, like, I see the lateral violence workshop. Do you see maybe something like another workshop kind of that to address these issues here, to build more awareness? Do you think that's something that might come out of this, in addition to policy change and transformative change within organizations? Do you see the kind of a workshop coming out of this?
Are you sure? I think anytime you can create the space for these kinds of conversations is a great thing. When you're talking about people to speak out and to stand up to all of those things, I just want to be careful in pointing out that some people are really alone. They're very alone. And for people who are in that position, reach out. There's many organizations and people across the country that can give you support, that can talk to you, that can walk you through some things and how to handle certain things. There's so much resources out there. It's more so than when in my day, when I was raised in Inuvik. I was in foster homes back then and never had the opportunity to I didn't have anybody, and now that's changed. There's so much resources out there that, I encourage people who are in that position to reach out, to talk to people, to talk to someone you trust. Don't carry it alone, because if you carry it alone, down the road, it leads to somewhere that you don't want to end up. And I just want to, put that caution out there.
Thank you for that. I think maybe mine and Audrey's commitment after a follow-up on this is to identify those organizations and provide some links on our website and our Facebook page that folks can utilize. And Annita, while you were away, we volunteered you to create a workshop on this topic.
Well, that's fine. I was having some technical difficulties. I thought something's wrong with my outlet. I thought it was plugged in and it's not working. So thank God I have another way to connect to you. So I apologize for that.
No worries. Just looking at my questions, going to check the chat box. Let's see. So we've shared the two websites. I believe we've shared the It's Time First Nations, itstimefirstnations.ca. Thank you, Regional Chief Kluane, for sharing that. We've shared that on the Facebook Live. So I see the last kind of commenter I'm looking at is, Penny Nicole. Worst is when people hurt their own people, when non-status or non-members, they are treated better. I think this is coming, this comment or comment is in part of the earlier commentary here among the panel about, that intergenerational trauma and colonialism or whatever, the variety of impacts to people and how we just learn to harm ourselves. We harm ourselves, we harm each other and find ways to do that. So, that's Penny, we did discuss that earlier and hope that we can offer some resources for anyone who would like them and, try to share that as much as possible. I'm just also curious I know we've really talked about some of the reasons why this resolution is here, how it came to be, and I'm curious as to what are the kind of immediate and then long-term solutions or opportunities that this resolution might bring. I know there's a report, there's a mid-report, there's a final report. One of the things I did hear so far is this organizational transformative change on this issue. And right away, why I said workshop earlier is because people, I think, will want someone to help them or something to use an instrument or tool to help their organizations understand this issue more. And gaslighting is a new term. I'm still trying to figure out that term. And thank you, Regional Chief, for sharing that, because it's I have to educate myself a bit better on that one. So, what are we hoping? What are you hoping to see, short term and long term?
I definitely, this is a moment for change. This is a moment for leadership, integrity. When we go to stand up together and wear, seeing so many people wearing the important moose hide pins, we're showing up at MMIWG 2S+ marches. We need to be sharing and showing that integrity all the time. So again, this is, I think in the short term, I look forward to, I think as many people are also looking forward to getting all that information in terms of the updates and the report and what has happened and where things are moving. In the immediate, I think it is having these types of conversations, having more of them, and openness to having these types of conversations. And in the long term, I mean, ultimately, for our region, I'm not the first woman to serve as the regional chief. I'm the third. And I'm really proud of that because our region, and I know the region of British Columbia, right, has had a number of women also serve in this role. And this is a role, this is an important role with a lot of responsibility. And the roles in terms of being an elected leader, right? Those are really, really important responsibilities. How are we going to make it better for the next generation of women coming behind? And I acknowledge I'm a younger person, and I certainly recognize that. But if there will be anyone coming behind me, I feel the responsibility to make things better than they are now, because the women that have come before me have certainly done the same. And I want to thank them for that. Shirley Adamson and Mary Jane Jim, former Yukon regional chiefs who've served for this particular region. And there's other women, of course, that have served across the country. They paved or broke the trail, so to speak. And so now, you know, this resolution and the time and place and space we're in right now, feel that responsibility to do everything that is in my realm of possible to make sure that what I've experienced, the next generation of women doesn't have to experience.
I think for myself, when it comes to what are we going to do in the short term, medium, midterm, and long term, I think one of the most important things for me is, you know, because I work to help protect land and to protect spaces and, you know, Indigenous protected spaces, I think the same thing, the same concepts of, you know, protecting our Mother Earth and protecting our water and, you know, respecting Mother Earth. I hear people say that all the time. I hear leadership say that all the time. Every gathering I've been to, I would hope that the same, you know, values are going to be applied to our women about, you know, how do we protect our women? How do we start respecting women? You know, how do we start investing in our healing? Because, you know, economic development is very important. I understand that because I promoted a lot of economic development in our territory when I was in leadership. And it is an investment in the community, but investing in our personal development and our wellness goes a long way to creating wealth in our community. And that is true wealth, when our people can have that investment in healing and have those spaces to do that kind of healing. And it's gonna take, you know, some little steps and then big steps, but I know we can do it. And if we don't have the resources in our community, that's where, you know, our leadership can put pressure onto the government to say, you know what, we want to have healing in our communities, and we have that right. We have a right to enjoy our lives, and so our children can enjoy their lives, and so we're not continually being oppressed. Like Doris was right earlier. She said it's 2020. It truly is, and it's our human right to have these healing take place from oppression. Thank you.
Thank you. Chief
I
Dar?
think that, you know, it starts by having that conversation. And it starts, you know, it starts by developing your own respectful workplace policies. It starts by ensuring that, you know, you have good programs in place like community safety, that you work towards that, because what that does is it helps you to start that conversation around safety. And you'll find that a lot of the issues around safety in the community evolve around lateral violence, evolve around all of these issues that we're talking about. And I kid you not, when we first started down this road with community safety, our women were sleeping with baseball bats by their bed. That's how scared people were in this community. That's not happening anymore. You know, we still have issues. We still have our social issues, but it's way better than what it used to be. And I think just creating a good forum, you know, a safe forum for people to have that discussion and for people to bring out these issues in a good way. And, you know, those are just some of the things that we have done in our community. And we've implemented restorative justice measures that will also help along with that. We have our Jackson Lake Healing Camp, and, you know, all those things, when they come together, they start to make your community whole again. And we focus on the infrastructure in the community. You know, people come into our community now and they look around and go, wow, this is a totally different place than when I left 6 years ago or whatever, you know. And it really, it starts with taking pride in your community. and building up your people, giving them the programs and services and the opportunities to move forward and all of that. You have to look at it as a whole, look at your community, look at the entire community. And that's what we did. We had we implemented our community safety program in different phases. And one was the community safety officer. And we have that portion of the program where we have, what do we have now? 6 officers, I think, 5 or 6. I can't remember where we're at now, but they work alongside the RCMP, and they fill that gap between the RCMP and the community. And you'll find that there are many, many issues such as sexual assaults, impaired driving, all those kinds of things that when our people are victimized or victims of these things, that often there's no support for people between the RCMP and the community level. Chief and council can't be there for every incident, but you can fill that gap. That's another thing, is that I always tell people, chief and council can't solve all your problems. If you want community safety, if you want healthy communities, then that change has to come from the community. Chief and council can put the programs and resources and the funding and everything there for you, but they cannot do it alone. They need the community to be there with them, to walk alongside of them, and to support them. Don't tear them down. I know that chief and councils, and I've heard from enough of them to know, face tremendous abuse across the country. And that kind of thing can really tear at your soul, can tear at your spirit. And if you have suggestions or whatever, get it across in a good way, and support your leaders to be able to move these kinds of things forward. And that's what happened when we took a stand against the drug dealing and the violence and all the other things that were going on in our community. We stood up. And the woman and the elders stood with me, and we made this change, and it was transformative change. It was, with community safety, there has to be a fundamental shift within the community. And we made that shift. And for those reasons, our community is so much better off than it was, 6 years ago. We worked so hard at changing our community around. We're now recognized internationally for this, that people look to us and talk to us about community safety all the time. We're not violence free or anything like that. We still have our issues, but we've managed to bring a lot of that down, way down. Yeah.
Thank you. Looking forward to seeing that. Be looking on your guys' organization's webpage for some of this information. I'm sure of it. Kluane, do you have any? We're talking about the hope to come out of this short-term, long-term. What do you see? Some successes, opportunities?
Listen, I want to thank you so much, Chief Holmes, for your leadership in bringing this together. I really hope, and taking off perhaps the hats for a moment that we all wear, as women and those who identify, for us to have that opportunity to connect and to talk and to share. And there was one thing, Annita, that you said that I really, am more mindful of now more than ever, which is about women supporting women. And, Chief Bill and I had a chance to talk about this a little bit this week. It's so interesting when you start a new position or a new role, and it's like the people who you thought might be in your corner then aren't in your corner anymore. Or, as women, right, we can be this like indestructible force together. But then there's the moments where we can also just like rip each other apart. And I've seen it happen where it's like, unfortunately, we've also been set up to do that to each other by other people who have no real interest in what it is that we're trying to do. And so without getting into too many details, what's most important here is to say, we might not all be friends. We might have different values. We might have very different ideas on how to approach particular issues. But at the end of the day, we need to find more ways to support each other. And I had someone reach out to me this week, and they could be listening, I'm not sure. And, years ago, a situation that had left, for me feeling like I just really couldn't trust, right? I just really couldn't trust somebody. And so there wasn't a friendship, there wasn't a relationship even. And I had someone reach out to me and they were like, I'm really sorry. I'm really sorry that, I didn't show up, that I for whatever reason it was.
Mhm.
And I just want you to know I'm in your corner. And if that's okay with you, like, I want to apologize. And I just want to let you know that I'm in your corner. And it really, I was like, wow. And I haven't responded because it's kind of one of those things where you got to really think, right? Like, I've read the message over and I'm trying to think about this very authentic response that I want to share with this person this woman, Indigenous woman who had the courage to come and to say, I'm sorry. And it made me think about, the other women in my life that maybe I've had a relationship with, and maybe there's been a breakdown and maybe we're not friends anymore. And that's okay. We're not all going to be friends. But at the end of the day, if we can do more to show up and to support each other, regardless of opinion, regardless of perhaps some misalignment of values in some ways, but that we're still going to be supportive of each other and not perhaps be best friends, that's what I want to see more of. It's women stepping into each other's corners, because if we can do more of that, I really feel like we're going to be able to continue to press these issues even further. And because those are the things that we can all agree on, right? So it's coming from a place of, where do we all align then, instead of where we don't align? And that's what I'd really like to see. And so I don't know if that particular individual is of course listening today, but it really did challenge me in a very positive way to say, I think I'm going to do the same. If there's a relationship that might have dwindled, or if there's a friendship that may have ended, sometimes friendships are for seasons, but for that woman to know that I'm still in the corner, I think that's really important.
Beautiful. I'm so inspired. Just like everything we're saying, I'm hearing here and we're seeing in the chat is just resonates so deeply and profoundly with me. And I now really realizing that why I took this up. I feel that in my heart. I was going to tease Annita as she gets on here. Annita, we volunteered you for another project, just so you know, okay? I feel that I've, lost friends in this role as well. And whether it was my actions or their actions, whichever it was, it's, and I still carry that as like, what happened? Like, why can't we be in each other's corner? And that when you said that, that's really what I've been kind of carrying around is, why can't we be in each other's corner? We don't have to be best friends and hold hands and run down the street together, but we can stay connected and let each other know that I'm in your corner. And, there's people that I know I have to apologize for my behavior to if I have hurt their feelings or push them away. And, it's helpful to know that it's important to share your story. I mean, I think as I talked to Chief Bill early on, it was like, when I saw the resolution, I instantly knew that we had to have this conversation. We need to share it, because I felt like I've been suffering in silence and not knowing if I can speak up or whatever that is. And just hearing, and if it's just me, like I know I'm carrying around a lot of that, feeling like I'm targeted and harassed and bullied and all of these things, and it's a horrible thing to carry on a daily basis. So I really want everyone to know, all the women out there, to be in each other's corner, to support each other, even if you don't really like each other, at least let each other know that you care about each other. And that we really do need to help our men. And, it's majority of women who have pushed this resolution forward. And I feel that's going to be majority with us who have to start those conversations with the men in our lives, in our communities, and leadership, and our colleagues. And to start creating these safer spaces and finding better ways to work with each other and not in opposition. Like we're all, all my relations. There's a reason that term exists, is all my relations. And I really honor each of you and all of the work, and for being here and for being brave. Kluane, earlier we were talking about, I read, when I came across, before I came into this position, I picked up a book someone recommended to me. It's called Dare to Lead by Brené Brown. Yeah, so I was thinking she must have read Brené Brown's Dare to Lead, because it talks about that vulnerability and putting the armor down and just showing up ready to fall on my face and get in that arena and get bloody and dirty and fall on my face, but pick myself back up. And for everyone to be able to do that, it was such a profound learning for me. So just want to honor each one of you. And, I just want to note the time. It is 10:38. We kind of queued this. We just booked your time until 11 o'clock. I'm happy to continue this further that. I think Annita wanted to share some slides or a bit of a presentation, correct? Yeah.
I'm kind of okay if I went over the basics of lateral violence, so I don't have to share the slides. It's okay.
Yeah.
I just want to say to you, Mina, surround yourself with good, strong women and good, strong people that will support you. I was in your position when we did the community safety initiative, because there's a period where you start off, you talk about community safety, and then all those issues start coming forward, and the people who resist the most will start to attack you, and you go down, you drop, you feel like you're feeling right now that you're being attacked, you're being all these kinds of things. In those moments, I have an elder I go to. I have some very strong women I talk with. They hold me up, they lift me up, they keep me going. And you put your eye on the end goal. What is the end goal here? You want a safe community. You want to make it safer for our people, our women, and our children. And you keep going. And when things start to work, you'll find you'll come back out of that slump that you've been in. And I mentored other women chiefs who were implementing community safety programs. And they've come to me and talked to me about some of the things that they are facing, and tears flowed. And I looked at her and said, I know exactly where you are. I know exactly where you are. But I can tell you, you need to keep going. It will get better. Once you start implementing these things that will make your community safer, keeping that conversation going. And one thing that we've never spoken about throughout this is that communication to your people is really important, really important. A lot of leaders, I always say this, a lot of chiefs are not good communicators. And it's just a fact. I'm lucky that I have a media background. And I'm not the best communicator in the world, but there's still issues. But, you have monthly town halls with your people, have monthly meetings with them, have something, keep that conversation going. And by keeping that conversation going, you'll begin to understand what is happening in your community. Because when we first started, we did not know. We thought we knew our community. But once we were done this entire process, it blew me away. I was like, wow. we actually really didn't know what was going on in our community. And it opened our eyes, and it helped us to see what we needed to do to implement certain things that would make our community safer for women. You know, something as simple as clearing a trail from one end to the other. You couldn't see down that trail. It was very easy for women to get attacked. You know, we never think about those things in our community. We never. Something as simple as lighting the buildings. You know, something as simple as taking away all the old junk, the garbage, and those kinds of things. We took 12,000 tons of garbage out of our community, you know, and we're still working on that. And it's amazing, though, the changes that can make. And, you know, I just want to say to you that we hear you, you know, we stand by you, we stand with you, and that reach out. If you need support and help, reach out. Don't carry it by yourself, because you don't need to. And because if you do that, it does long-term damage to you, can do long-term damage to your health, to the people around you, to your family. You know, these kinds of things have devastating consequences. And just, you know, just stay strong, and you're doing the right thing. You know, you're doing the right thing by having this conversation. That's part of it. You're on the road. You're asking those questions. You're inquisitive. You're you know, you're thirsting for change here, and that's where it starts.
Thank you. I love that phrase, thirsting for change. So I want to recognize just before I'm going to have to start asking everyone for closing remarks here. I just want to recognize my two predecessors. You see behind me all of the photos here. These are all of the previous tribal chiefs. We're missing one. One of the frames fell down, so we're getting that one fixed. But Mavis Erickson and Linda Pierre were the two women predecessors here at the Tribal Council. And, you know, if they're listening here or ever get a chance to hear this, you just want to, you know, shout out to them and thank them for they had a tough time here. I heard, you know, I've heard from them and heard stories, and, you know, that's really, it's because of them and that I can be here right now. And it's because of them that I feel strongly that we need to bring about change, positive, helpful, healing change for our daughters, for our future leaders, and all of those women. I heard it earlier in here that there's so many young women and young folks who refuse to get into leadership because of the toxicity and what they witness and what they see. And it's, you know, I'm really inspired to start delving into, you know, how can we create the safe space and promote more, build up in capacity and understanding, safety, build up future leaders to step into these roles that they're not quite comfortable right now in the current situation. The fire truck's going to go by here. So I thank you so much for everyone. Again, I'm just really honor each of you and thank you for your support. And I want to take everything that support you've shared here and just put that out to the universe and to everyone listening who gets a chance to see that, to take that exact advice. Surround yourself, find support, and surround yourself with strong people, and be in each other's corner. And even if we have to, you know, not even, but, you know, in some cases we may have to make some amends with folks, and to mend those relationships, as you said. You know, it's not about, you know, be best friends, but at least let's just be in each other's corner and support each other. So maybe Annita, you want to start with you?
Sure. Thank you, Mina. Chief Holmes, I just wanted to say, you know, today was a really empowering conversation. And I felt like, you know, we were lifting each other up, but we're also, anybody listening, I hope we helped lift you up today. If you were feeling isolated, or if you were feeling, you know, that you were feeling down on yourself as a woman, I hope that you know, were able to feel empowered by some of the powerful words that were said today, by all the women here. And, you know, one of the biggest things that became the change in my life, and a huge change, is that I had to role model the behavior that I wanted to see in other people. And I can tell you that, you know, I am loud and strong and all of those things. But you know what? I took it down a notch. And I just, you know what? I learned to be softer and kinder to myself, And that's where the real change started, is that I began to tell myself, you know, I am valuable. I am worth it. And you know what? I'm a valuable woman, and I am not any of those things that the media depicts Indigenous women to be. I'm much more than that. I am resilient. I am strong. And I tell myself that all the time. And now I believe it. And that's the difference, you know, and now I work really hard to role model that behavior, to empower other women, to hold other women up, and really try to create safe spaces for women. And you know, when Mina talked about me doing lateral violence workshops, that was one of the reasons why I created started facilitating lateral violence workshops, because I wanted it to be an inclusive conversation where it included men and women, young people and older people, so that we could heal together, and that it wasn't just one group of people who were going to advance in healing, because, you know, it only works if we're all in it together, you know. And I'm really, really proud of the step forward that's happening for Indigenous women leaders and women, because, you know, for far too long, we were very, very isolated in a lot of those rooms, and we weren't respected. And even if we were, we certainly didn't feel it. So, you know, and I'm not saying all men are bad and all women are good. I'm just saying, you know what, it was the political reality. And now there's a landscape for it to change. And I think that going to make all the difference for up and coming women leaders. It's going to make a huge difference for when we go to meetings where we can feel like, hey, I'm valued and what I say is valuable and I'm being included in this conversation. I'm not just like, oh yeah, you speak next, Annita. Like, so for me, I think that's where the real change is going to come in, is when we role model the change we want to be. And sometimes it can be really hard to say, you know what, I'm not going to say anything right now, because you know what, if I do, it could be really harmful. So I think that I'm just going to take a step back, and I'll talk to you another time. Like sometimes you have to take a break, you know, because sometimes I hear really hurtful language and I don't want to explode and do all of those things that would be hurtful. So when I do that now, I say, I'm going to talk to you and take a pause, but I'm not going to talk to you right now. So sometimes we have to take that healthy pause in order to respond instead of react. And that took a lot of work, and I'm still working on myself. And that's what I always tell people. The goal here is not to be perfect. The goal is to be aware of our behavior and to change. And you know what? None of us are going to be perfect. I certainly am not going to be perfect, and I don't strive to be. I just want to continue to make change and to recognize that we deserve it. Like we really, really deserve it, because we've had so much hurt and so much oppression in our communities that we deserve to feel love and be loved. So I just want to say that in the most, you know, I always just try to be as loving as I can and as genuine as I can when I'm talking to people. And that's where I think the change really starts. Thank you for having me today. Madhu Gunesh Chish.
Thank you. Chief Doris, any closing? I don't like saying closing remarks. It's like this is just the opening conversation. So, thoughts?
Yeah, yes, it's just the beginning of a really good conversation, and a long overdue one. You know, Kluane said something a while ago to me that kind of stuck in my mind, and it was around Resolution 13. And you know, for us, it's not about having a national female leader. It's really about how women feel within the organization itself. Are they supported? How are they supported? You know, our jobs as female leaders going forward is to make it better for those who are coming behind us. You know, it's our responsibility to support women who are in these roles. You know, we have so much responsibility here. And I think that, you know, we've come a long ways, but we still have a ways to go. And, you know, I have been talking about this issue for a long, long time. And I see so many communities out there that are wanting to change. Part of the change is making that change happen within your community. You know, in Yukon here, we have 11 self-governing First Nations. Within our First Nation, one of the things we did was put the Indian Act aside. You know, it like I saw a comment earlier, is because it creates different classes of people within our community. It creates hard feelings amongst our people. So let's just put that over there. Anybody who mentions the B word, I call it, banned, we have a swear jar. We don't use that word, you know. We rarely mention the Indian Act unless it's in the context of policy or whatever. And that's part of moving forward, is shedding those colonial, processes and systemic things that made our communities the way they, we brought all that baggage with us when we adopted these things. And part of our challenge is to shed those things and to move our communities forward in the way that's culturally appropriate for us. In a way that our community needs to design and develop the programs and services that we need for our people. And that's what's going to start to make all the difference. That's why we've made so much progress, you know. We still have the Indian Act kind of creeping in now and then, and we kind of fight it back, go away, you know, we don't need it. And the other thing too is that as a leader, and I think this is really important, is good communications. And also, you don't have to do this alone. You know, one of the things that I did very early on in my term was we had the murder of a young girl in our community, and all those issues started to bubble to the surface. And one of the things that I did very early on was invite all the top politicians in the community to come to our community safety meeting, a safety meeting that we pulled together about 2 weeks after this happened. And I told them, I don't want you to say anything. I don't want you to say a word. I just want you to sit there and listen. Just listen. And they did. And they came away from that meeting absolutely somewhere in tears walking out that door. They had no idea what the city of Whitehorse, how that their citizens in the larger city were affecting our community. So what we did was go about and create partners with them. We sat down with them. We developed interagency groups. All kinds of things. We partnered with them to improve our infrastructure, to improve the relationship and the communications between our community and theirs. We really, rather than pushing them away outside of our community, they can actually help your community improve and move forward. And if you partner on certain programs, when I brought the community safety program to government, they were blown away. They were blown away by what we had put together and wanted to immediately partner with us. We said, we don't want just funders. We don't want someone to just fund our thing. We want partners. We want true partners that will help us, make our community safer for our people. And that's what we did. So it's really important that you don't close your door off. You don't close your community off, because, you never know what you're closing your door to. Some great opportunities out there that you might capitalize on that can help your people. And I just want to say in the end, stay strong. We're thinking of you, and if you ever feel the need to reach out, I'm here, and I know Kluane is there in that beautiful Kluane country. I know, it just, I'm so sick of COVID that I want to travel and just get out and, not with 10 feet of snow behind you. But I just want to keep encouraging people to move forward, speak out, reach out, and yeah, you have a lot of people walking with you. You don't realize it.
Let's see. Kluane? You're muted.
Everything they said. The last thing, and someone said this to me recently, they're like, just remember, like, I'll use the word crap, take no crap and do no harm. Right. And so it's like, I try, really trying to do that, like hard on issues, soft on people. That whole concept of like, it's so much easier. And I've found this, myself, say, people who we may not, again, always align with, or we're not friends with all the time. It's so much easier to be kind than it is to kind of be nasty or to be mean, or to like, it's so much easier to just say hi than it is to like pretend you don't see someone in a room, like, so let's just be more kind. Like, let's just be more kind. And those are the things that when it is, those moments where you're like, yeah, face down in the mud, like something's happened, someone's shamed you or humiliated you, and you're just like, you just like want to give up. It's like, okay, always mindful of like some of those women who are in the corner, or the ones who have come before, and like all the things that they've done and that they've dealt with, that like, that you're not the only one, and you're not alone in dealing with it. There's probably another woman dealing with something very similar somewhere. So that's where I get, the energy, the resilience. I think of my grandma, who always told me, like, just don't think so much, Kluane, just do it. Like, if you know you need to do it, just do it. So there's moments where you feel the fear, right? And you do it anyway. There's a lot of moments that I felt in the last couple of years where I've been really scared, because I'm not sure what it is that I have to say is going to be, how it will be perceived or heard. But I know that I've got this responsibility to make things better. And so if I can, as Chief Bill mentioned, if I can be of support, or, have a check-in or a touch point, like, I'm always happy to do that, because it is also that reciprocity in terms of being able to, and Chief Bill and I have many a conversation. There's other incredible women in elected leadership positions here in the Yukon and beyond, that, making those connections. So, for Chief Holmes and Annita and I hope we can also stay connected, right? Because we've been through probably a lot of the same. And so how do we navigate some of these really complex matters together? So women supporting women, really, that at the end of the day is so important. And if I can be of support, let me know.
Wonderful. Wow. Like I said, I don't want to call these closing remarks. It's more about, this portion of our ongoing conversation and ongoing engagement. I am sure that we will get requests to reunite here and perhaps get an update of where things are at, and sharing stories, and possibly having more people join us in the future. I did reach out to a number of people who might be of interest, but I'm glad we were able to get together, and I look forward to continue this conversation. And I'm just looking at the comments that are being posted by Audrey into our chat box, and I see Louisa and Annette and Candice George and Penny, and Nicole, and others who are, saying thank you. They're very grateful. They're feeling inspired, encouraged, stronger. I think that's the intent here. The intent here is to help everyone and women understand how to support men and women, how to support address these issues. And something I'm going to a big message I'm walking away with today is women supporting women and being each other's corner, and let's help our men as well.
Yes.
So,
Can I just add one more thing? I put it in the chat box, and it is that we in the Yukon, we put together a missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls strategy. It was announced recently, and now we're just implementing that strategy. And one of the pillars in that strategy is community safety. So you may want to look at it, and it's a guide. A lot of people, the missing and murdered issue is a really huge, complex issue. A lot of people talk about solving it, and where do we start? Many communities struggle with that, and we started with putting together a strategy with community safety as one of the pillars. If the strategy is out there, it may be on the Yukon Government Women's Directorate website. You may want to have a look at it, and it gives communities a guide, of how to start these conversations and how to move forward with making your community a much safer place. And we're the first in Canada to do it. So I just wanted to put that out there, and then just to let people know that, you're not alone. Yeah.
Thank you. Trish Fury, Tibbetts.
It's Grandma Bear. I wanted to say, Madut, Nedischa, I love you.
Oh my God.
Be good to each other, be kind, and watch my granddaughter, Annita, on Cooking with Annita. Madut, I love all you girls, women, girls, maybe men too. Madut.
Oh, riot.
I loved, Annita, your last cooking show. I love when you were making moose soup and you were like, something happened and you broke your spoon or something, and you're like, some things always happen on my show. I'm like, things always happen on Anita's show. It's so good. I love it.
Like one day, just dumped a bottle of my avocado oil. It fell on the floor. I'm like, okay, roll with it.
I love that you do that show, right? Like just real time. We need to get more real. I love it.
Yeah. And when you were dancing. Awesome.
I was so glad to be feeling better. I just had to show you I was happy and healthy. Thank you. So that's Tuesday night, Cooking with Annita, Facebook Live.
Excellent. And Annita, too, I think there's a request for Sherry Tibbetts, so asking for everyone's emails here. Just a shout out to everybody in Facebook world and on the online internet. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you for coming and participating here. Thank you, Audrey McKinnon, Communications Officer Extraordinaire, pulled this together in a really short notice. Thank you so much. I think, Audrey, we had like 20 emails back and forth, not including text.
Oh yeah. Yeah. It was, you and I think we could have just stayed on the phone the entire day and it would have been the same as calling each other every 5 minutes to get this organized. So, and I want to say as well, Mina, thank you so much to you for, the idea of safe space, and the importance of that was brought up a lot throughout this. And I think that you've successfully created a safe space for this conversation, and you've made it public, and it's reached so far 563 people on Facebook, which is great. And it's going to reach even more. So masicho to you and to everybody else on the panel as well. I wanted to make sure that I got a chance to say that as well.
Thank you so much. And to everyone else on Facebook world, thank you again for joining us. Stay tuned. We probably will have a follow-up to this. And is that Anita's grandmother will be joining us? Or who's that? Nadak. Thank you. Look forward to continuing to do this work and bring awareness to this very important discussion and finding solutions together and finding ways to be helpful to each other, be kind, be in each other's corner, et cetera, et cetera. Masicho, Sanchalia, everyone. Thank you.
Madu,
Here.
Narisha.
Masi.
Nananushishi.
Bye.
I've ended the live stream, so we are, thank you so much, everybody. Well, everybody's gone now, so.
Yeah, Doris, we'll have a follow-up. We'll send an email out thanking everyone officially.